Okay, we're going to be doing a scene on Mohawk, Everyday Digital, 100-pound cover weight, white coated silk. Don't you love the name of that paper? So it's not quite matte, but almost. It's somewhere in between matte and glossy, but it's far closer to matte than glossy, so just a little bit of a sheen to it, okay? It is coated paper, though, and it is available out there. Maybe not internationally, but you can probably find something similar. These coated papers that are a little bit kind of dull, they go by, I don't know, like satin, silk, dull, that type of naming convention over, say, something like just plain matte. Okay, so I'm going to create this ridge line up here, and we're going to place on top of that, coming from the background, this rising moon. This is a cloud with rising moon. Put this elk right in there. Kind of a dramatic setting for this backlit full moon coming right behind this star of the scene. A lot of trees in here, some crepuscular rays coming through the trees and shining through. I don't know if I've done that on the dull paper before. I might have, but I just don't remember doing that, so we're going to try it here. I also want to try these crepuscular rays on some photo paper using some alcohol pens, which I am really eager to try out. That was the soft hill. Now that usually represents something a little bit more distant than what I'm doing here, but by putting this elk right on top here, it kind of brings it forward. Otherwise that could represent something that's miles away, but it's all relative. It just depends on what you put on top of something. There's not something so specific that that can't be something 5 feet from us, okay? But I make it where you can use it very distant or very near, and I try to do that with all of my designs to make them as universally applicable as possible, but you want it to represent each distance very effectively, and that's always the kind of the challenge when doing designs. There's always this kind of interplay between the very specific and the very general, or as general as possible, because you want these things to be, you know, the stamps to be able to be used in whatever way the user interprets, okay, for that particular scene that they're working on. That's the Sedge Filler. I've added it to both sides. Now, if I didn't have that soft hill, I could have used this to make that whole structure in the background. This looks a little bit busy here, but it's just providing the foundation, so you don't need to worry about kind of too much of the incorporation in terms of the textures. Everything kind of comes together through the coloring and detailing process, so we don't need to worry about that. Now this one right here is the grass texture, and as you can see, it's just it represents something a little bit closer, although I have seen it used very recently for a very high grass kind of in the background, so I don't know, good thing it works that way, so it was awesome to see that application of it. Okay, so we have our foundation here, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to stamp out our trees. Now if I were to do something that was going to be something that's right around like high noon or so, you know what I mean, daytime, sunrise, whatever, I might do these trees in some various tones, greens and variations of green, whatever. It could be a deciduous tree here in the fall. But since this is going to be moonlight, I'm not really having to worry about any of that, because you know, it depends on what kind of time of, you know, nighttime it is. You might be able to see a little bit of color still, but generally under a full moon you're not seeing all kinds of different tones. Although you can do that, you know, we don't have to represent everything, you know, so accurately, realistically, you know, etc., etc. You can make things how you want it to be. But I'm going to make this scene fairly dark, and I want it fairly dramatic, So I want these trees to stand out against all of those darker tones in here that, are going to represent a nighttime situation, okay? But like I said, you can make a nighttime scene, baby blue if you want to. I just did a scene recently where the nighttime, I don't know, it didn't really get more than kind of a mid-tone blue, mid-value blue. When I was working with alcohol pens. So you can do all kinds of different interpretations and adjust things accordingly, okay? Tree cluster large, we'll have some different trees here in the foreground, and what we'll do is we'll create this staging that will flank this main character that'll be right back there in the distance, okay? It's one of those, like, I don't know, dramatic moments in nature when you're out. It's always kind of special to see animals, really, of any sort, but, especially like an animal up in a ridge. It's very majestic looking and whatnot. I see it sometimes when I go hiking in the deserts. It's always really kind of special to spot something like a bighorn sheep out in the desert. And, I don't know. It's always kind of like up on a plateau somewhere. It seems, when I've seen them. Okay, so anyway, blue tones. We have some deciduous trees in here, evergreens, elk, and the reason why I'm doing this particular composition is because I found out from someone on Facebook. They just happened to mention that they watch the videos and their kids watch it. There's a 10-year-old that he gets up in the early morning and he requests to see my videos. So I said, hey, let's do a scene for him. And what would he like to see? What's his favorite color? And get a little art direction from them. Because we're going to dedicate this to this 10-year-old. While they're still watching my videos before we lose into Minecraft videos forever, like my son. Not that my son never watched my videos, but, while I have the eyes on me, at least sometimes, I don't expect a lot of kids to be watching my lengthy, kind of drawn-out videos and whatnot, but interesting that they are. I love it. Felt like stamping something out for them. And I thought that might be fun. So let's do something for them. And this one goes out to Malachi. And it's going to be entitled Malachi's Moon. When they told me his name, I thought, it'd be cool. Just for the name part, of Malachi's Moon. I love alliterations. Malachi, that's your vocabulary word for today. Ask your mom what that means. But it just so happened, I said, hey, what's his favorite color? And she says he loves blues. And I was like, yes, because that's the type of coloring that I like to use with nighttime scenes. I think, you can do anything in scenic stamping, of course, but like I said, any type of coloration for any time of day. This is the maple pear. They said there's a lot of deciduous trees on their property, so we're going to add these in here. There's a deciduous tree in between these two evergreens right here, and I flank it so that we can color kind of that interior one there. But this one right here is just the maple pear, so hopefully we're creating kind of a little bit of a situation, that you might see kind of on their land, on their acreage. Not that we're trying to replicate anything, but we're doing something just kind of in the spirit of. You can go for replication, but when you do something like that, you really better have some pretty, specific designs where you can do something like that. Because after all, we're really not trying to do something that the camera can do so much more effectively. So it's always going to be an interpretation, especially with the limitation of, the designs we might be utilizing. All right, there's our main character up there. And I have these trees kind of flanking it like so. Now I do want to go for some moonlight kind of shining through some of these trees, so we're going to create some additional opportunities in there for that crepuscular ray definition. Look up crepuscular rays there, Malachi, if you're watching this video, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Crepuscular rays, believe it or not, they're parallel with each other, even though from kind of visually they look like they're, you know, kind of emanating in, you know, like an angled type of perspective. But I don't know. Sometimes I didn't want to believe it, even though I've read that so many different times. But I don't know. They're parallel lines, or rays, I should say. They just kind of look like they're, like I said, going off in off at different angles due to the perspective, I guess. So I don't know. Interesting to me. So crepuscular rays. What do we have? Alliteration. I love alliterations in words. It makes for a great title, though. I love alliteration titles. Alliteration names are always cool, too. Okay, now let's see. Okay, so I think I'll go for some larger trees here in the foreground. This is one of those situations where I'm really, since I have something a little bit more definitive in mind than what I usually have, instead of 80% winging it, you know, this is one where I do have something in mind. How it's going to turn out, I have no idea, you know, until I do it or until I get closer to it. But see, having these trees in here, I'm allowing for more kind of this oscillation between this light coming through some of these trees. So it'll be coming through some of them, and then it will be going in the back of other trees. Yeah, you'll see what I mean when I get around to it. Okay. I haven't worked on this paper very much. I just got it, and I've only done a couple tests on it, but it sure takes the imagery really quite nice. This kind of silk weight, you know, dull. What other word did I say it? They often refer to it as dull. Satin. Yeah, satin. All right, now I know they told me that it's kind of more deciduous trees, but I need something solid in here to really provide my, you know, myself with a really nice kind of framing device. So trees are a really great framing device for compositional purposes. Okay. All right. All right, now Malachi, what we do is with this one is we kind of have it at different heights here. If you do it at the same height across and just evenly space them out, it looks a little bit too uniform. You wouldn't see something like that out in nature naturally. Now, if it's a, you know, like a tree plantation or something like that, you'd get that type of thing. But we stagger it so that it doesn't look so repetitious, you know, and boring. You know, if you get just too much of the same thing. So different heights in here. You can see that I've used different portions of this one. You know, here and there. I use the smaller one here too. But then I use some smaller portions of it throughout. Okay? So really kind of vary it. All right, now I need a little bit more here, I think. I think those rays are really going to be, that's going to be the star of the scene, but these rays are going to be right up there. All right, now masking. This is what we're doing. We're masking off these trees like that. Okay? And I tell you what, this is what we're going to do too. We're going to wipe this off from the bottom up. Okay, now I didn't ink this bottom portion down because I knew I was only going to be using the top, but I'm going to vary this as well. I talk about this in my Stampscapes U, which is Stampscapes University of kind of partial impressions. Well, I talk about using different portions of it, but then in terms of lighting, you can kind of vary it like that. See that? And when you lighten it up down there, this tree, the silhouette of this tree stands out a little bit more because I've wiped off the bottom. So it goes from dark to light, and it goes lighter down into this one. So see, that tree isn't just like one big lump now, combined with that one. It kind of, it creates a little bit of separation between these two. And this is an easy technique. I'd recommend this for everyone to do. It's like everyone says I always make things look easy. Well, I use techniques that will make things easy to do, okay? Now, if I just stamp this out, which I always used to do in the past, years ago, it took me, I don't know, years to do it. And then when I try to lighten up those images, okay, so I'm taking a lot off, a little bit less, so it transitions from wet to dry like that. Sometimes I'd try this fogging effect down at the base, but I thought, well, why don't I just make it lighter to begin with? So just don't stamp it out, It's like if we're trying to blend anything in, if it blends in, if it's kind of a lighter version of something like that down there, right? So see how that kind of transitions like that? It's a little bit darker, a little bit lighter down here. I'm not going all the way to white or something, but it just kind of lightens up like that. And that'll kind of come into play, especially when I'm doing kind of the accents in here. But see how this is really coming together? Let's see. Let's create a little bit of space in here. Okay, now this is going to look a little bit weird because I haven't added all my additional tones in here yet. So let's take kind of a darker tone blue, because this is going to be a blue composition, okay? We can utilize our color scheme that we're going to use in here to our advantage when it comes to distance, okay? Now, I'm going to use some distress inks because I know a lot of people don't have Marvies, and I don't know, a lot of people have Mentos, Distress, etc., okay? But the big thing is that in this technique that I'm going to be using on here, it's going to be dye-based inks, okay? And we're going to use a range of them. So this is what I always recommend to people that want to kind of really push distance, is that you utilize lighter versions of whatever color scheme you're working within. And in this case, I would consider black to be within the color scheme. It's not really a color, but it's a value that we're using. If you use a lighter value, it'll represent something that's farther off in the distance. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I could stamp out this pine row here in black, okay? If I do that, it'll kind of visually come forward, though. But if I do it in a color that's lighter than whatever color's already existing on the scene, black, then this should recede visually, okay? Recede means kind of go off in the distance, not really physically, but visually, okay? Okay, now see that right there? I've really taken off a good portion. You can tell kind of, it's a little bit darker up here. It's because I've wiped off a good portion down here. Sometimes you have to take off a little bit more than you think. I mean, you don't want to take off everything where when you stamp it out, you can't see it at all, but when you go with these darker colors, you can kind of wipe off a little bit more than what you think you'll need from, I don't know, from what I've experienced. Okay, and I mean, it's not a tremendously dark blue, but it is up there. It's probably like a 80% maybe value of blue. But see that right there? Look how that transitions really nicely like that. Now it looks weird, but this isn't the end result. We're going to add in a lot of different tones into this scene, so I don't know, it's always really fun. I love doing this type of thing with like sunset colors and things like that too, where you stamp out background trees and reds and oranges, and the lighter tones represent lighter trees, and it always looks really weird when you stamp it out without the toning process. So alright, that's right here. Alright, now I'm going to have the moonlight in here, so I tell you what, see this tree right here? I'm going to lighten that up a lot too, okay? So it looks like it's being illuminated by that moonlight. Now I didn't do it really on that side, but We'll do it on this side. Okay, so see it's a little bit lighter on the bottom, so it doesn't obscure the silhouette of these trees, and it's lighter on this side. Now that's, I mean, it's like an advanced technique, but you can't really say that that's like a hard technique to do. It's just something that you kind of take into consideration. It's, if you have a light source here, then an object here on its right side might be lighter, and the object to the right of it might be lighter on the left side. All right, so it's little things that you can kind of keep in mind, and as you kind of get into scenic stamping, you can kind of consider those little things like that. If I had a moon right next to this tree right here, I would lighten up this side before I stamp it out, so it's a little bit more gray than black. Okay. All right, so how's that looking as far as our setting goes? Okay, now we're just missing our moon right here now too. Okay. So I'm going to stamp that out in the same blue that I just did on those trees, okay? This will be our light source in the scene. All right, now I'm stamping it out like that. There's a lot of dark areas on here. Now here's what you do with sky images in general. Now I don't have to do this, but if you're working with a really super juicy pet or a really dark black or something like that, what you do is you just wipe off the edges around your imagery like that. Okay, now this one I am stamping it right over the top of that elk there. That it's called buck, but it's really like an elk. So I'm wiping off this portion down here because it's going to go right over the top, so I don't want this to be real dark in there, okay? So it's a little bit of consideration right there. All right. Now, that definition of that moon might not be as distinct because I've stamped it out in a lighter color to begin with, and then I've wiped off a lot of this right in here. And I've wiped off the perimeter so that when I start to do my toning to blend in this image, I don't have this really strong rectangle shape, okay? So it's the same concept. You just kind of wipe off the edges like this. That's what you do to tonal designs in general. We never do that with linear designs. That's, you know, something defined by a line. Because if you wipe off the line, then you're getting rid of the entire image, right? But that's the difference between tonal, kind of high detail designs and linear ones. A lot of people get kind of locked into the linear methodology of rubber stamping, okay? And that's what you kind of have to break out of sometimes if you've done a lot of that and you've kind of developed all of your techniques around that type of concept, okay? But this is kind of freeing in a way, you can say. Okay, so see that right there? I didn't stamp it hard enough right there, so that could have been a little bit more distinct, but that's fine because we're going to tone in all that anyway. But see, look at this. This is a fairly dark blue, but look at this. It just absolutely blends in with the background. And this is, you know, this is a rectangle shape right here with all that tonal stippling around the edge, but that just blends right in, right there. So that's all you do, is you just kind of wipe off what you don't want to display distinctly. All right, so this is going to be, I was thinking about doing this in glossy cardstock, but then I thought, let's play around with this silk weight. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit more texture in here while I'm doing this. This is the Tiny Rock stamp. I like a little bit more texture in my grassy area, just for variation. Oh yeah, one of the other things I was thinking about doing is this horseback in here. I don't think I'll do that. I was considering it. I don't know if they do horseback riding out on their property, but I was going to say, okay, this is them going out horseback riding and whatnot. Okay, so, going back to this. This is on that silk weight paper. So, on glossy, I would use maybe a paper towel just to blend in my tones, okay? But on the silk weight, not just any kind of non-glossy paper, just in general, I find that the surface is a lot more absorbent, okay? So what I've found to work really well is just a sponge, okay? Now, the color box stylus tools are sponges too, but I find that the kitchen sponge, and this is as ratty, used, yucky of a kitchen sponge as you can get. Look at that. Look how terrible it is. I'm using this because we were going to toss it out. It was time for a new sponge, you know. And it works just fine. And I'm going to go for a lot of coverage in here. And this kind of sponge like this, now I've rinsed it out so it's damp. Okay, it's not sopping wet. I don't want it sopping wet. But it's very damp, and it just holds a lot of ink. So something that holds a lot of ink, it's going to get naturally a lot more coverage. Okay, so I'm just using some distress ink, in this case, re-inker fluid, because I find that it goes much faster than dabbing forever into a pad and laying that down. I will use some pads, but for this first color, I just find that that works great. Now that looks really like stained right there, but I did wash these my sponges out before I started this, so that's just stained. That black shouldn't come out onto my paper. All right, so let's see how this goes. Okay, now a moon or something like stars or a sun, those are going to be, sky figures in general are going to be kind of your source of light, even if it's a cloud or something like that. All right, so I don't want to tone that out, but I want that to stand out, okay? So what we do is we take the area around it and make it darker, okay? And one of the things that I can tell immediately is that this paper is very absorbent, so it's really, you know, it's practically working on matte, okay? Now this paper, this sponge here is really wet, okay? Now these inks right here, I use the Marvy inks because they're a little bit thinner, they penetrate more as a result. But if you're using thicker inks, okay, and you don't allow this to dry, you might be getting some drag marks, okay? If that happens, and you know that's going to happen with like Memento Black, they're thicker, then just simply allow it to dry a little bit longer, or try to heat set or something like that, okay? Yeah, but I am getting some drag marks right down here. But this is supposed to be dark anyway, all right? And it is going to incorporate some black tones in here, so I don't really care about that. I don't know, maybe, yeah, I think it's dragging the image, so this blue looks a little bit more gray blue. But, like I said, that's fine with me. Okay. Now what I like to do is I like to oscillate my lights and darks, remember? Like in my lighting videos, if you've seen those. So I have this light in here, it's a little bit darker here, but then see, retain a little bit of light somewhere else. Don't just tone everything out. Vary your light and darks throughout, okay? And it doesn't really matter too much where you do it. You know, I have this light right here, but if this was light over here and this was dark, then, you know, you still have that benefit of variation, okay? Now, I'm almost done with this first color, and I didn't have to re-ink one time, okay? All right. So that's just one tone of ink, and we've done it with a sponge here, okay? Going a little bit closer to the moon. Maybe I don't want that moon so super bright or light. So I just put a little bit of that blue over the top of it. I'm kind of doing it with a little bit of a drier sponge like so. All right, and that looks good to me. Now, we could, here. I was going to say we could try a little bit more of this tumbled glass here, the very light blue. Let me see if I can get it darker just using my existing blue. If you can go darker using the existing blue just by putting on a thicker coat, then do that rather than jumping to the next tone, the next value, I should say. It might be got a little bit darker. Not too much. Let's jump into the next one. Okay, let's see. I'm just using this lid here, this convenient lid. Let's try the Broken China. How about that? There's a Memento Bahama Blue. That would be good. But let's stay with the reinkers. I don't have reinkers for every color. At some point in time, I just stopped buying pads for all of my colors that I wanted, because I just don't need the pad, because if I'm not stamping out impressions with a certain color, then if I'm just using it to color, then I get more ink in a reinker bottle than I do a pad. Okay. All right, now when you're going with your next tone, apply. Observe the difference too. See, it's not that huge a jump between this color and this color. But you want to kind of, you want to have control over that next application of color. Okay. All right, Malachi, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever seen a scene like this, but one of these days, when you're older, maybe, and you're out hiking in life, maybe you'll come across that image, and you can say, hey, it'll bring back a memory for you. But in the meantime, what's good about stamping is you can just stamp it out too. All right, so see that right there? The darker you go on the perimeter, or wherever it is, the lighter the lights are going to seem by contrast, okay? Look up that word too, Malachi, contrast. All right. Retain your light areas now. Usually when people are kind of learning about lighting, they're thinking about filling in this whole space right here, because they're thinking kind of more in the spirit of like a coloring book, which you kind of can, but if you do that when you're filling up whole areas uniformly, then you're missing the opportunity for lighting, and lighting can really be the difference between, I don't know, kind of a more uniform, kind of dulled emotion, okay? When you have a little bit more contrasts and you're playing around with light, I believe that's where the emotion comes in a scene, okay? It's not really the imagery used. It can be, the imagery can have a big part of it, but it's selective coloring, okay? And lighting does not have to be kind of this difficult notion, okay? Lighting just simply means don't color everything uniformly. That's the way I see it. And I think that's why it makes it easier for me, because as I'm coloring, I'm looking at my light more so than the streak that I'm laying down, okay? So if I do this right here, see, I'm looking at this light here, okay, as I'm applying it. So I'm seeing how this is affecting this. So I'm really observing this area in here. That's my light, okay? So think about that, so right in here, I'm thinking about this lighting right here as I'm applying this. That way I don't lose it all, okay? A lot of people lose their lighting kind of when they get into their darker tones. They define it really well with their lighter ones, but then when they get into their darker tones, that's where oftentimes they lose it, okay? So that area down here, when it comes to the ground, that represents reflected light. So I have light source, and that light reflecting back at that light source, okay? Now, if it was up in the sky like this, like say I put a streak here and streak here, then that kind of streak in there kind of represents kind of a little bit more atmosphere. Can't really see it too much because that, you know, that background is still a little bit dark, but we'll try to represent variation in the sky when we get into those darker tones. Okay, but you see that's kind of starting to develop down here. I can develop our shadows when we start moving into the darker tones too. Okay, see that right there? It's an oscillation of light and dark. We have dark, light, and kind of dark. Let's go a little bit darker. Okay. See this right here? Dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So create that variation. And all I'm doing, when you look at it, it's not hard. All I'm doing is this. It's basically this, okay, and leaving areas lighter. You know, it's most, you know, when you get into your darker tones, okay, with some of the lighter tones, I did get into these spaces right here, but, you know, when you look at this right here, do you see these streaks right here? And here, the streaks right there. This is not hard to do, but the retention of those lights sometimes can be if you're not used to retaining them. So, just as you're doing it, observe the light areas, okay? I don't want, you know, hard lines like this, you know, like that. That's not lighting right there. That's kind of like stripes or something like that, okay? But it's just going like this, see? Work it from very light tones. And then you have your lighting, okay? I didn't know that was that much ink still in my sponge here. It just comes to show you what, you know, how much ink a sponge really holds. And that's what, yeah, it makes it really easy. Some people say they've tried the sponge and it didn't work for them. I would recommend, if that ever happens to you, to give it another chance, you know. I mean, this is, you know, this is not hard to do like that. But it's a little bit more precarious if this is sopping wet and you go hard, okay? So just, it's almost like you're just applying a light touch. I always say, imagine yourself applying like makeup to a child's face, okay? That's the pressure you want to use on there. And you get it darker through repetition, not through, you know, super hard pressure. Okay, let's see. Why don't we move into the pads, okay? Let's go into our darker tones. This is kind of more on the value of those background trees, okay? I haven't switched sponges. I'm just still using that same side of sponge. See how much darker that one is? Okay. Now here's the thing. When you get into your darker tones, don't use it as much. You just kind of, you're a little bit more perimeter oriented. Outside to inside, okay? See that right there? I might put this streak. These other streaks came all the way through here in those lighter tones, but this one might just go right to there, okay? But it's not this right here and stop. It's this right here. See that? Tapering like that? Okay. Tapered strokes, Malachi, that is another vocabulary for you. Tapering means it kind of peters out like that, okay? Thick to thin, or thicker to thin application of color. Okay, and when you put it up here in the sky like that, doesn't it have that kind of moodier look? See that, right? That tapering like that? See, when you do it like that in the sky, okay? So it's just using your natural motion like that, not here and then up, okay? So it's just like going like this. Okay? Now I like my perimeter to be quite a bit darker than the interior, and that creates a nice frame around my piece, okay? And plus, the darker I take the exterior, the lighter the interior is going to seem by contrast. This paper is getting really quite, I wouldn't say super saturated because it's still taking the ink quite well. When it's just not getting any darker, the more you tap it, it means that the pulp is pretty super saturated, in which case you can just let it air dry for half an hour or something like that, just so it's not quite so damp. But I can tell this paper feels kind of, I don't know, it feels heavier now. Okay, going around the perimeter. See, I'm kind of tapping and streaking too. I think it'll be mostly like taps for now on. But see those background trees? Aren't they kind of just blending in with the background now? See that? By bringing in those tones. Okay. Okay, I'm hitting my shadow areas at the base of some of these trees. I might use my color box stylus too, if I can, if I'm allowed to. I don't use my color box stylus tools as much anymore just because these things just simply aren't available. But I don't know, like you can use paper towels too, like for like little detailed areas, okay, like shadows or something like that. See, I can go in here and just add. See, I'm doing this little shadow right at the base of my trees, and when you do that, it really anchors those trees down. Don't do a hard streak like that. Although that's, I don't know, paper towel's not allowing me to do the hard streak, which is exactly what I'm going for. But see that? It's a really light version because this paper towel is absorbing the inks. Okay, so that's kind of what you want. You just kind of want a light touch though. See that right at the base of those trees? I'm going to add black to it too. It looks kind of weird having them just dark blue like that, but let me see, this is Prussian blue. So I've gone one step dark. Prussian blue is really quite dark. It doesn't look quite so dark right now because I have all the other colors of blue in this one, plus, water from kind of rinsing out the sponge before I started, but I'm getting sponge crumbs. This is a ratty old used sponge. I should start off with a new one sometime. I tend to use something until I just can't use it anymore though, so as long as something's working for me, I tend to use it until, it's just absolutely out of commission. Getting a little bit more dramatic. I'm thinking about those crepuscular rays, though. Boy, those are going to be really quite dramatic. This is really dark. It's almost, I'm wondering if it's almost too dark to use those rays, but, we'll see. I want to use them in here, so we'll see how it goes. I might do just very faint versions of them. Okay, here comes black. Before I go to black, this could use some warming up. You can use, the tones right now are okay, but I really like this specific color. It's Caribbean blue, and it has a little bit of green in it, so it's kind of going off into the next color on the color wheel. Okay, so it's moving into the greens, and when you do that, when you utilize these analogous colors next to each other, or in this case right on top of each other, it creates what they call a color glow visually, okay? So I'm going to use some of that. Yeah, that is perfect there. See that glow working right there? So blues and greens, you know, reds and oranges, oranges and yellows, purples and blues. But look at that. Isn't that really just bringing that alive? It's amazing what one color can do. And sometimes the brightest colors are in the shadows, so you can really use this in the shadows too. It's not going to make it a pure version of this color because you're putting it over the top of another color, but look at that glow right there. I'll show you the difference between here and over here. See that? And look at that, especially right down here. So in scenic stamping, when you're working this way, there's always, well, there's almost always, I'd say 99% of the time, there's always something that you can do, or practically always something you can do. See this area down here, it lacked some spirit, life, from a visual color standpoint, okay? But adding this in here like this, it's really kind of warming things up, and it's doing what I was mentioning, that color glow. I like having these glowing colors on these scenes. I always kind of liken it to kind of like a jewel. We're not working with light in a scene, but we're working with contrast, because this is always reflected light. We don't have a light bulb behind the scene showing through. So in order to make something look like the light is coming from within the scene, we utilize contrast, lights, you know, against darks, light against dark. But from a color standpoint, you can use color glows. And I have a whole video on that. It's color glows and how to achieve them. I don't know, you can look at, if you go to the Stampscapes channel and just click on the little magnifying glass and just say color glows, that video should come right up. But I'll talk about how to do that. But see this kind of glowing light, right? I kind of liken it to, especially when we're using dye-based inks like this. Dye-based inks are transparent, so the colors underneath always show through whatever color you're laying over the top of them, okay? So even if one color is really quite buried, like where'd it go? I don't know, the broken china, the tumbled glass, that's not lost under here. Those colors are all shining through, so it creates this kind of jeweled look, as if, there's a certain type of radiance that comes from layered, transparent colors, and in this case, reflected light. Okay, adding a little bit more color right around that moon there. We'll do it in this Caribbean blue. Marvy doesn't sell dedicated pads anymore, okay? So this is a Caribbean blue case, but you can always get the number 104 ink off their website, re-inker, and just use it like I did. You just squeeze some of it out, something like that, and just tone it right in. I don't really stamp out too many images in the Caribbean blue, so I have the pad. I know I'm not going to just let that dry out and just use the re-inker for now. I use the pads if I have them, but if I didn't have them, or if this thing eventually kind of just crumbles, which they do after like 20 years, then I'll just utilize the re-inker. I don't think I'll use a blank pad. Although I don't know, it is one of my favorite colors, so who knows? I never say never, but probably not. Okay, now let's add a little bit more tone around it. I think that's all the color that I need. I think we've created a really great color glow. Alright, I am going to use my stylus tool here, I think. Sometimes after using that paper towel for so long, I get kind of used to that. The paper towel might actually work even better on this matte paper. This one's, it's almost kind of absorbing the ink too fast off of my, out of my tip there. The stylus tip tool, tips don't hold quite as much ink as just like a wadded up paper towel. So actually this is a little bit more comfortable for that. I love the stylus tools on glossy cardstock. They're just really comfortable in the hand, and plus you don't get your fingertips so inky. I don't have anything against that, but my fingertips are quite inky these days after stamping using paper towels. Okay, now keep in mind, and keep with that kind of streaky look, use that for kind of an aesthetic as well as kind of a process. I'm glad you're watching these videos in the morning, Malachi, because they get a little bit long. We want you to have to kind of watch it in, to be continued modes, or in installments, part 1, part 2, part 3. But see what I'm doing here? Streak up here. But see, I'm bisecting it down here, so I have this kind of lighter one going back in here and a lighter one going in here. And that way, you create that variation like that. Okay? And it's all with that kind of tapered look. Look how, see, this is going straight into a pretty inked up pad, and I'm just doing this right here, and that, okay? And I'm not, a lot of people want to get this in one stroke. They go like this. Oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing, but, that took like, I don't know, 3 seconds to do or something like that. It doesn't take a long time. But I do get it, though, because in most forms of stamping, you're getting 100% version of a certain color when you stamp that image out in that ink. Or when you're using like a marker, and you put a marker down, it's 100% version of that color. This is kind of asking someone to utilize whatever colors of ink they have for a very strong version of it, but we're also getting, every version of it from 100% all the way to like 0. Here's 5%, 10%, 20% of that ink in terms of the value of it. So it's kind of weird of a concept. But if you do that, you're really pushing when you look at a color like this, you're able to utilize everything from black through 100 versions of gray down to white. This is like 100 versions of this color all the way down to white. So you can really maximize, in a way like you've never done before, all of the potential values that one color can give you. All right, hitting my trees. Here, I am going to use this right here. Let's create a little bit more of a strong silhouette on this ridge line, okay? See this where I'm doing this? So that bucket there is fairly dark, so I am going to make this hillside darker to match that strength of silhouette in the hill, okay? I have this at a little bit of an angle like this, as opposed, I'm not going for like this circle shape like that, oval, okay? It's a little bit angled like this, okay? Okay, tilted. And see, I'm getting this tone right here through the process. I don't know, it's probably tapping it like 50 times or something like that. So always use, to me, that's an easy technique. Going for something so fast, that's hard to blend in. But this right here, that is super easy to blend in because it really is just taking my time to do something. Okay? Okay, I'm adding some shadows at the base of these trees again. Let's see if I can get any darker on my four corners. I call this tipping the edges. When you really kind of frame off the four corners in a darker tone, or in the darkest of tone, it really frames this composition off really nicely. Okay, spread it around though. You don't want just a kind of like an oval shape, you know, harsh oval shape there on the corner. I'll show you what I mean by these four corners right here by doing this. It's blending in pretty good because my corners were already fairly dark. If you're doing this, trying to do this black around like a baby blue or something like that, sky blue, it won't blend in as much, but see, I've utilized all those other colors in there. So see this right here? Look how nicely framed off that is. Tipping the edges. It's like putting a frame around it. Okay, we can kind of frame it off even more. Down at the base like this. It's interesting working on this silk weight or silk finish paper. I do like the matte look. I like glossy too, but I don't know. I really don't. I don't know if I have a preference. Like, oh, but I still like glossy more, or something like that. I really don't think that way. I mean, if someone asked me and I had to answer, I'd probably say glossy, but just because of the potential of it. The potential of glossy is achieving a wider range of both saturation and value, brightness, relative brightness and relative darkness of something. That's why, you know, so many things are printed on glossy. Book covers, postcards, calendars, etc., okay? But there's a certain type of kind of tactile quality of matte as well that's really nice to work on. Okay, and one of the things I've been using a lot of is alcohol inks this past week, and using it in conjunction with, you know, the dye-based ink coloring is something that kind of I usually did a lot more of, but over this last week, what I've been doing is I've been using the alcohol inks exclusively for my coloring. This is just going in and adding some little embellishments here and there, like some specific areas of color. This is just a really light blue. This is a Marvy La Plume Permanent. A lot of you familiar with like Copics and things like that. Any type of pen like that. See, I'm just going in here and just kind of reiterating some of the lighting schemes that are working in here. This can potentially add a little bit more richness to it, you know, because alcohol inks are also transparent. So if you lay this over the top of these other transparent colors, you can potentially achieve an even deeper, richer glow, perhaps. You can make things darker, whatever. Okay, here's a bit of green right here. Okay, it's a real pale green. I'm not going with anything too bright like that, but going into the green, it's another analogous color to blue. Maybe I can get into some really specific areas like this. Maybe I can go in the sky. Kind of warms things up in here. It isn't quite so cool of an overall color scheme now like that. Okay, let's have some fun with some pigment inks in here. This is what I have been waiting for. It's going to be potentially a little bit precarious. It's so dark in here. But let's see what we can do with some kind of general applications of this ink. I'm pushing the limits on your on the scene here, Malachi. That's what we're about. We're about growth and kind of stepping into the, you know, the unknowns. The, you know, if you're not a little bit uncomfortable doing a scene, then, you know, you're kind of not pushing the boundaries. And we always like to push the boundaries. I always like to learn something new in something. Hopefully I don't learn something like, oh, that was a complete disaster and it ruined the scene or something like that. But the techniques that I do, none of them are, you know, it's not like brush calligraphy where you just lay something down and just like, you have what you have. This is going to happen incrementally, okay? All right, so here's what my concept is right here. Light from here is coming in. White pigment ink on a cotton ball, not in a real thick application, but I'm going to put it on the sides of these trees facing the light, okay? I'm going to start off with that, then I'll add in my crepuscular rays later, okay? Now this isn't so sopping wet, it's still kind of a dry cotton ball, even though it has this pigment ink on here, okay? But watch this. I'm adding it, look at that, coming right over the ridge like that. And against this tree. Now remember, on this tree, I could have lightened it a little bit, but I really didn't, so I can knock it down with this. Like I said, I could have lightened it up to begin with and stamped it out a lighter tone to give me a little bit of a head start, but look at that. Doesn't it look like that light is kind of glowing now? So I don't have it on this side, so it looks a little different. So let's add it over here. On this side of the scene, the trees are going to be glowing on the right side, right? Because the moon is to the right of them. Okay, I'll just make the moon kind of glow in general too. Now, if I'm getting some on that elk, that's fine because it's like the moonlight is, you know, hitting that, you know, subject matter, or character within the scene. All right, so look at that. Doesn't it look like that moonlight is kind of glowing a little bit more now? See, I mean, that elk, you know, that was as dark as this down here, but now it's kind of in the, it's bathed in moonlight or whatever. So I think that kind of makes for a little bit more of an emotional type of visual, you know, scenario there. When you kind of have lighting within a space. Okay, now this is also why we've retained some light areas down here. If I don't have any light areas down here, I can't put any of this ink down here because it would stand out. This has to be a little bit light down here to reflect some of that light up here, because you're not going to have this kind of glowing mist down here if it's all kind of this dark over here. So I wouldn't add some of this over here. It would, you know, it would look kind of weird. Because what you're doing is you're saying that this moonlight is hitting some fog down here. So retaining a little bit of that light is good. And where this looks really good is where light meets a darker area, okay? Now we're going to, that's not, now the crepuscular rays are a different story. All right, so we'll add some of those in there. Crepuscular rays could be from anything. It could be from, you know, a moon or a sun or anything like that. Okay. I have to add a little bit more than what I think looks kind of ideal, because when this pigment ink dries, it dries darker, so I'm adding a little bit more. You can always let it dry and see what it's going to look like, and then if it dried and kind of darkened up too much, then just apply another coat, you know, an additional coat, and kind of build it up a little bit more. But look at that glowing kind of floor, you know, meadow floor or whatever you'd say. Doesn't that look fun? But see, it's a little bit thicker. I'm applying them more in the lighter area, and then as it moves out here, I'm dissipating it, okay? Look that one up too, Malachi. Dissipate. So what do we have? We have alliteration, crepuscular rays. Look them up on the internet. They're really cool. You can see them coming out of the clouds and whatnot. And then dissipation. You get dissipation kind of with this too. It's thicker and then it dissipates like out there. So what I'm doing is, see this streak right here? I'm kind of coming in the white area. I worked from dark to light this way with the color. Now I'm working from light to dark with the white. See? Coming out this way. So that's the general concept. See here? That darker color came in like this. I kept streaking in like this. Now, where I've retained the light, I'm coming into the light and going in the opposite direction. If you guys can kind of get that kind of general concept, you can use that in, I don't know, 95% of your scenes, and it'll, you know, I don't know what percentage of scenes I'm doing that in, but it's a lot. And when I add this pigment ink in here like this, it really can solve a lot of kind of visual problems within the piece. It's not something that went astray, though. It strengthens weaknesses, but it also kind of really bolsters up the strengths, too, okay? Okay, now see those trees in the background? Look at that kind of separation. Remember how I've stamped those trees lighter down here? Now see, I've added this down here, so they just kind of disappear like that. See these trees down here? Dark to light because it's wet to dry. Now watch this. I'm going to put them in a little blanket of glowing mist from that moonlight down here. So see, stamping them lighter to begin with, it kind of gave me a little bit of a head start. If I didn't do that, it was fine. It would just take me a few more tappings with this, but I really gave myself a head start with this mist like this by just stamping out those trees lighter to begin with, because it looked like they were going into the mist because they go from wet to dry, dark to light. Okay. We're working a lot of different little strategies here into your scene, Malachi. I'm trying to kill several birds with one stone. So it's a dedication to scene to you, but it's also a scene in lighting strategies, I guess. All right. Boy, that scene looks fine just as is. But let's see if we can make it more dramatic. 10-year-olds like drama, you know what I mean? I'm not talking about emotional drama, but visual drama in pieces, right? Okay, so let's see if we can get some of these rays coming from this moon. Okay. If I want to. That looks pretty cool as is, though, but let's see what we can do here. Okay, let me see strategies. Moon rays coming from here, over here, and down here. What I'm looking at is, okay, if I have a ray coming through here, like this, I think I want to have it going over the top of these trees, but behind these ones. I can have it going in front of everything, you know, if I want to, but I think some rays going back in here, behind these trees, and then popping out from, like, in here maybe. Something like that might look kind of interesting. Okay, now if you haven't seen me do these crepuscular rays before, you're probably wondering, what the heck is he talking about? But this is what I'm talking about here. Okay, a couple pieces of or one piece of copy paper here, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do these kind of source of light rays in here. Now, I'm not going to want to go too dark with this because the scene is pretty dark and these rays would stand out quite a bit if I do it too dark, okay? Is this the sponge I was using? Let me see. Not sponge, but cotton ball. Okay, and I'm always going to try to keep my same point of emanation, okay? A little bit more ink towards the front of the ray, the source of light, okay? And as it moves through, a little bit less. Okay, so point of emanation, I'm going like this, and it'll be like, the deer's, that elk's ear or something like that. So, see, every time I do a ray like this, and then I come over here, I'm going to start it from that ear. And then this will go like this according to however wide I want that ray to be. I think that looks pretty good right here. See, there's my light beam. So it's not something so stark white or anything like that, okay? I think it still looks incorporated in with the, the general lighting scheme within this piece, okay? I think it looks pretty good, okay? But, again, I think it looks good because it's not overdoing it. It's very translucent, okay? Look up that word too, Malachi. Translucent. Okay? As opposed to opaque. Okay, there we go. Another ray. See that right there? It's always going to look weird, okay? Until you add a few in there, otherwise it doesn't make sense. It's like, what do we have? A laser beam, kind of in the scene or something like that, or it's it's like a lighthouse, Okay, now on this one right here, I'm going to have it going behind a tree that's right there. So I'm not toning out this whole thing like this. I'm kind of working around that little spot, okay? And when you do that, it gives kind of depth to these rays. It's it's working on different planes. It's not kind of a two-dimensional kind of application of this concept right here. It's behind certain things. It's in front of certain things. And with this ray here, I'm kind of giving it a little bit more weight up on the top of the ray and then the bottom part. So I'm not just evenly doing this, and I think that makes things look a little bit more natural. Can you see like that? So see that tree right there, that ray, it's in front of that ray, but on this ray right here, it's in front of the tree. So see, it's adding a little bit more depth to the piece. And then also vary the thicknesses of your rays too, okay? Have them some kind of narrow, some a little bit more wide. You can have some that are stronger than others, a little bit lighter. You can kind of start it really weak, though, to see if you like it. And then add more accordingly, If you go and you lift your paper up and you think, oh, that's not light enough, then, it's not any big deal. Just lay this back down like this. Like this ray right here, I think I can strengthen it more to get it to stand out a little bit more. Ooh, maybe that was too much. Or maybe not, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, see that right there? That ray's a little bit stronger. Let's group this in fives, maybe. I'll have 5 rays on this side. How's that? I'll make a ray for every year for you. Malachi, you're 10 years old. I'll put 10 rays. How about 5 on one side, 5 down there, or 6 and 4, whatever. This is what you do. You can layer. This is what a lot of people do in art or whatever. Not to get too overly artsy with this, but let's say you're doing something for some kid. And it's their 10th birthday, whatever. You're making a birthday card, let's say. You can do something like this, and you can layer things with kind of meaning to that individual, the recipient. It doesn't have to be a kid. I don't know if, I wouldn't want to do 102 rays in here for someone that's turning 102, but you could, but see, you can do something like this, or if you know, like, their birthday, you can put their, there's like a, let's say their sign is Scorpio or something, you can put, Scorpio, the constellation up here in star form or something like that. There's all kinds of little things you can do. This one right here, he likes blues, so I'm stamping it in blue. But you just kind of layer things like that, and meaning or whatnot. And it could be your own interpretation, of things. But I think that it makes it fun for you as the artist, or the interpreter of the project, to do those types of things. You don't have to stick with them, too stringently. It's all about kind of interpretation and your artistic kind of notions about what you want to bring to something too. It's not like it's not going to be like a wedding invitation where people have, it has to be like this. I want you to do this thing for me. Like a commissioned piece like that. Okay, so there's 6 rays. We're getting older and older here. I'm glad I'm doing this for you at 10, not 32, as far as the crepuscular rays go. Okay, I'm putting this ray behind a tree, so I'm going to avoid going over the tree. Now on this satin paper, or if you do it on matte, this pigment ink sticks a little bit more. If you're doing this on glossy cardstock and you don't like something, that'll wipe right off, okay? I don't like it. Even after it dries, you can wipe it right off with a paper towel or something like that, no problem. But on this paper, it kind of sticks, a little bit more because it's kind of absorbing and whatnot. But you see that? How it's filtering right through those? I was thinking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's not what it looked like, but it kind of has that that light coming from over the horizon. If you've if anyone remembers that movie. I'm talking about the poster of it. I don't think it was actually in the movie, that scene. Okay. Behind this tree. I'm going a little bit gutsier now by putting in this brighter ray like that. Okay. These rays over here a little bit. See, I'm watching this as it dries, and it's looking a little bit too light over here. Let's go. When you first start adding these in, it really stands out, but then when you add a few more, you can see kind of more of the continuity, and with more of them, it starts to make sense. So oftentimes you go a little bit kind of, you know, lighter like that. See, that kind of stands out a little bit more. Okay. And I don't know, I just kind of look at it, I eyeball it, and I just kind of decide, okay, we need a little bit more of, you know, a wider version here. And I don't know, I can never really plan that out until I do one, and I get to the next one, the next one, the next one. It's always really kind of hard to tell. You kind of have to play off of the ray that you've just previously laid down, and to take a look at the piece and see how that latest ray affected the overall scene. Now I'm running this one down into a pretty dark area, so let's see, like that. Okay. And I don't want things so even usually, so this one goes like this. I might put another one kind of up here, I think. And I mean, you could evenly space things out, but I just think it's better to have some kind of closer together here and there. I think it looks more natural. It looks a little bit more varied that way. Okay, here's a nice, real thin one here. Yeah. All right. I just laid that down. I don't know if it's just me, but I think it's almost like I can just see that disappearing, like as, you know, each second goes by. Okay, now I'm looking at these two really bright, thin beams. I think it needs to be balanced off with this one up here a little bit more. How about three kind of pretty bright beams? And the other ones are a little bit darker, a little bit more transparent in the translucency scale. By the time you get done watching this video, Malachi, I hope you're not a teenager. This this scene's taking quite long, but I want it looking good, you know, before we lose you to Minecraft videos. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so that is that. Did we lose any? Now, I'm reassessing now. Did I lose some of the, you know, the lightness of that foggy area down here to darken up? And I think it did. So I can already go in here now and apply some more of this, okay? And also kind of laying this down like that, I might have, you know, picked up some of that pigment ink that was already kind of applied and lifted it to make it less visually apparent as well. So let's add a little bit more of this in here. Okay, let's get some of that lighting going. I think these rays are being caused by that moonlight, and it's not, isn't there some kind of like UFO types of things with livestock? Sounds familiar. If there is, you can put it in the comment section below. Is it like cattle mutilation or something like that? That's not this one, Malachi, but, you know, that Close Encounters of the Third Kind kind of reminds me of that. All right, I think that looks pretty good there as far as our misting opportunities. Okay, you know what I often do? I often add in my foreground images in here with black pigment ink, and then it's hard to go in and add these details, so I'm going to try to remember all these things to do before I get to that point. Okay, so this is your white paint pen. Okay, so if this is our light source, if I have highlights on these trees to the right of the light source, where will my highlights be on those objects? Will they be on the left of the objects or the right? We're making this into an assignment for Malachi too. All right, so if our lighting is coming from the center, the trees to the right of the scene, we'll get left side illumination, okay? Like that. Can you see that right there? Let me try to zoom in here a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so the trees on their left side, the illumination for them is coming from the left, so they are left side illuminated, okay? Even this tree right here in the distance is getting a little bit of illumination. See that right there? So I'm reiterating. I won't tell you to look that one up. That lighting scheme like that, okay? See that right there? Does that look like the light is hitting those trees right there? Let's even put some on this one right here. This tree doesn't stand out too much because it's kind of in the darkness, but if I put a couple little dots on it, it kind of makes that tree kind of stand out from the background a touch, doesn't it? I use more dots, more highlights on the tree that's closer to the light because the light is stronger right there. Yeah, and visually at least, okay? See this tree right here? I can put some highlights on the tops of some of those branches facing that light, okay? So, if the lighting is on the left side of the right side trees, which side will the lighting be on the left side trees? Will it be on the left side or the right side? Well, it'll be on the trees facing that light, okay? Watch out for your pigmenting down here. It's a little bit sticky because it takes a little bit of time to dry because that pigment ink is oil-based. Oil-based inks take longer to dry than water-based, okay? It's also the thing, that oil-based aspect of pigment inks is also the thing that allows us to kind of spread it around, you know, pretty easily. All right, see these trees? You don't have to stay right exactly on the branch or anything like that. There's that deciduous tree in there too that I can put even more highlights on it like that. Okay, so those trees, this one right here, right? A couple little dots here and there because it's in the darkness, so I won't add too many to it. Okay, see that right there? Look at that lighting on them. Isn't it making it shimmer? So one type of lighting with a very general tip like this, okay, cotton ball, big, flat, and soft, right? This is general lighting, okay? I mean, I framed it off like that, but this is a soft lighting, right? This right here, white in a very extra fine tip, that's detail lighting, sharp lighting, okay? All right, I can't access these trees very easily, so I turn my card upside down like this, and I can get at these trees easier by working upside down. Don't worry. If you put a dot on the wrong side of the tree, it's not like, oh my god, I put that dot in the wrong place, you know, something like that. Let me get some of these trees, these other ones right in here. Okay, see that lighting kind of in the background? It's just kind of a general shimmer right there. But let's put some of it down here as well. This could be dew or, you know, the first frost of the year or something, I don't know, at night. Isn't it kind of bringing that floor to life down there? It's like little, I don't know, little crystalline specular light, light that's brighter than white. And you say, well, what is specular light? What is light that's brighter than white? Well, like this ink pad right here. Do you see this kind of, this lighting right here? It's reflective of the light up there. This is white right here. This is a white pad, or this paper is white. But see that kind of that, you know, there's a little specular light. This is a reflective type of light right there. So it's kind of that light that reflects. And it's on everything. It's not just on water or something like that. It's on everything. It's on, you know, my nails here have kind of specular light, you know. My mom joked with me one time. She says, yeah, if you're going to start doing these instructional videos, you should have your nails manicured before. This is before I started doing videos. I mean, she wasn't serious, but she was just kind of joking around. All right, so, and it was pretty dramatic in there. I'm glad I think the rays added. Anytime the rays kind of work okay, it can really add quite a bit to the to a visual, I think. All right, so I don't know if you're going to be a teenager by the time I'm done with this one, but I don't know. We might have had to add in like an extra ray for that 11th year. But it's coming around. Oh, good. I washed out my toothbrush. Let's add in, let's put in all the little kind of methodology, you know, little tricks that that I do in scenes. Let's add in some of the Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white effects. Let's say there's like a dusting of you know, a little bit of snow coming into the scene here. I just like it as a nice visual effect in my pieces. I can almost add it in every single scene that I do. Daytime, nighttime, waterfalls, whatever. I tend to think that this looks really good as a texture when you do that. So Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. One bottle goes a very long ways. Now, like I said, I think that looks fine as is, but let's see what this will look like with some additional splattering, okay? If I'm ever at a convention and I'm doing this, if you're 10 feet away from me, you do not need to kind of back up, all right? That's what everyone does when I'm at the shows. I say I'm going to splatter paint, and like everyone kind of like backs away even if they're like 10 feet from me. But see, I'm not going just like zzz, you know, I'm going, watch my thumb here, I always say. It's just like 1 or 2 bristles at a time. See that? It's just a couple of things. We do that whole kind of spray, you know, crazy splatter painting, you know, if you're in like kindergarten or something like that. But this is a little bit more, slightly more of a controlled splatter. Does that make for kind of a nice winter type of scenario too, like that? If you're going to do a constellation, I wouldn't do that in the sky because you'd lose the constellation aspect of it. But okay, so there we go with that. I've got paint all over my thumb. That washes right out, though. That Dr. Martin's is, it's a beautiful medium. It's calligraphers use it a lot for their letter forms. Okay, so let's add in our foreground and call it a card. Call it a day, call it a night. VersaFine Black. It's a beautiful black pigment ink. There's the Claire one. I haven't used the Claire before, but I think people said it's Sukaneka. I don't know what the difference between this VersaFine and VersaFine Claire. Or is that what it's called, VersaFine Claire? I don't even know. But I think it's by the same company, so I'm guessing there's something different to it, but I'm not sure what. If you know what it is, add it in the comment section, especially if you have both and you know there's a difference to them. But we do need to go fairly dark. Look how dark that is, how much that stands out from the background. That's why I like to add these finishing touches with pigment ink. You know, I don't know, I use the VersaFine. But look how much depth that gives to the piece. And I'll add some other objects down below as well. Okay, so adding it at different heights here and there, okay. So it's like we're standing underneath a tree looking up there, Malachi, or you are. Okay. It's kind of startling how much darker that black is than the Marvy black here, isn't it? Although when I stamped the Marvy black at it, I mean, it looked pretty dark. I don't know if going over it with the different colors kind of gray toned it. I mean, certainly going over it with the pigment ink lightened it up, but I don't know, some of those, I didn't go over it with the pigment ink everywhere. But it just comes to show you the different looks of the different types of inks. Oh. Okay, this is the spruce tree again. And we'll add it. I don't want to add it. I'm not trying to just stamp right over my previous impressions. I want this to look like it's a closer tree than the black dye-based ink impression, so that we get that kind of distance and layering happening. Okay. All right. Look at that depth right there. Isn't that crazy? It's so much darker. It's kind of reflective too, probably because of that oil-based aspect of it. Okay, look at that. Okay. Let's go for a little bit of a bonier looking tree for the foreground too. I like to play around with textural differences, and having kind of a bare tree like this, I don't know, it does a couple different things from a visual perspective. It allows you to add something in that you can see around and through very easily, so you can get your benefit of the foreground without covering up what's happening in the background. But it also adds that kind of aged aspect to the composition by having something old within, you know, the newer growth or whatever, you know, those other evergreens. See, add that in there. But see, I think that enhances the other ones. Okay. And why don't I add in 2 or something? I'll add one right over here, I think. Okay. All right, I think that looks pretty good as far as our depth goes. It's always kind of really fun adding these little touches like this in the process. So, hopefully we've achieved a pretty deep space right here. Let's talk about the different things that we covered in here, okay? So, the general platform, okay? Now remember what I was talking about when I said, you know, I mean, it looked really busy with all that grass texture in there. We had, you know, the Sedge Filler and the grass texture. You know, it got pretty crazy in here, but it was just providing the platform. I mean, you can't see that, what's really kind of going on with all those textures. And we stamped it in black, too, in the end result, right? But nevertheless, it's the foundation for all of these different trees in here. Now, see, if there was something that went on with the trees, like in the impression portion of it, you know, stamping things out, I mean, they're in, everything's in here. I mean, you can see that, you know, the pine row in the background is just, it's almost like a ghost image. I mean, it's so subtle in the background, but it's there providing that depth. But if you have anything that goes on kind of in the stamping portion of it or on the coloring, let's say you know, we got too much blue or whatever. You know, it looked like a blob out here. You know, by the time you add all these other things in there, if you do, and you don't even have to add in all the things that I did, you know, with these rays like that. But if you add in that pigment ink or something like that in there for that little bit of fogging, then you add in these other elements like this for foreground, it really pushes back any type of things that could have been considered weak points far off into the distance where you know, it's really insignificant as far as kind of some stumbling block during the process. Things don't have to look perfect every step of the way. But if you just kind of work with your pieces and kind of see it to the end and put in your little refinements, then all those other little things that kind of might happen, you know, along the way that you might not like from a visual standpoint, and a lot of people focus on them and they just can't move on. They think, oh my God, yeah, okay, I gotta trash it, you know? But the finished pieces do not look like what this looked like 3 steps ago or something like that, you know? So just, I know that laying these things down like this, it solves a lot of different problems and whatever, okay, from a visual standpoint. Not that those were problems, they were all just part of the process by which to get to this end result, though. And it doesn't even have to be this technique. It can be whatever things you're working with, but kind of, you know, work with your pieces and see them to the end. So for me, it was things like, you know, darkening up this ridge up here. You know, that was like a weak point up there, but when I thought, okay, let me put a little bit of darkness up there, and then I darkened it, but then I also put that pigment ink right over the top of it, so it just kind of smoothed everything out. And from a textural standpoint, it really kind of brought everything together in the end. All right, so let me see. Let me see if I've covered my bases right here. We have an elk. I think that was my first kind of thing that I was, you know, told, because they probably have them out on their property or whatever, acreage. It's blue. Okay. And I have, you know, I got a lot of evergreens in here because I needed something stronger in terms of a silhouette to stand up against those deciduous trees. But, you know, those deciduous trees are back in here. They're a little bit more subtle and whatnot, but they're in there. And let me see, what was the other thing? Blue. So blue. Oh, and you know, as far as a kind of a thematic piece for the recipient involved, but I have the 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rays. All right, so there's 10 rays in there. It's like a birthday cake or something like that, you know. 10 rays of light for the 10-year-old viewer of the channel. And now he is 11 years old with how long this video became. So I'll definitely do a time-lapse video of that if that's too long to watch. But anyways, there's your scene, Malachi. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like that visual here. Let me see. Let me adjust my exposure. Okay, I darken this up a little bit. So as the scenes get darker, my camera kind of starts overexposing because I started off with a white piece of paper. So, but that's about pretty true to the end result looking, at least as I look in the back of my camera. All right, so Malachi's Moon. Fun assignment. Thanks for the inspiration, and thanks for watching the channel to all of you. But thanks in this case for your viewing, Malachi. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I guess that's it. Don't forget your vocabulary. Okay, thanks for watching.